What is your definition of spirituality
Um,
versus religion?
mhm. I feel religion is an organized structure that has been uh, assigned a hierarchy in many instances of those who have access and those who do not.
Okay.
Spirituality is something we all have and have a right to,
Mm,
which is our own independent connection
okay.
to all of the available energies and entities within the known and unknown universe.
Okay. Okay. I like that definition. Okay. Carry on. Carry on. Hey, everybody. So, welcome to Unapologetically 50 Plus. And I have my very special guest, Miss Christina. And we are going to talk today about going deeper spiritually, reflect, heal, and connect with your inner self. So, hey, Christina, how you doing, love?
Hey, Angela. I'm
Thank you.
always so grateful to be here.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you coming back on for a second time. And I remember when we first talked about, you coming on, you were talking about your spirituality. I'm like, yes, I want to have her back on. She seems like she has some knowledge, some wisdom. So we're going to jump right into this conversation. So let me ask you, first of all, when, and why did you take up this spirituality? What initiated this direction in your spirituality?
Okay, I believe I was always spiritual. I've always been spiritual
Hmm.
and always been sensitive to energies around me.
Okay.
And and in fact, even from a very young age, aware of the ancestors and their guidance. Could always, for example, my grandfather, who was my light, when he passed, I remember, I always, when I'm on the right track, I always feel his hand on my left shoulder.
Okay.
And I have since I was 8. He passed when I was 8 years old. And I always have since then. But I was raised in the Catholic Church,
Same here.
and began to, I think, around adolescence. And I was with it. I was with it until around adolescence. And then some of the hypocrisies and illusions started to reveal themselves to me of the church.
Okay.
Um, and we've talked about, I was raised in a very feminist household, pro woman household.
Right.
And my mother was a very staunch feminist. Um, and she was a feminist, not a womanist. She was a feminist. and um, but she had blinders on when it came to the church. Um, and so I began to see, how she had to put up these blinders
Right.
to remain in her faith, and uh, that never sat right with me because of my father, who was not Catholic,
Okay.
and was more, I would say, spiritual, but with a little bit of a Quaker bent. And his direct lineage wasn't very religion focused. Uh, in fact, my grandmother used to joke that she went to the Church of Marcus Garvey. Because on Sundays, rather than go to church, they'd go to see the Garveyites speak in Harlem.
Okay.
And so that's like my lineage, right? And so I just put spirituality on hold, and I got interested in like Wicca and witchcraft. And it was like, this, I began to study. You always have to, I always have to, it doesn't matter what anybody says. I have to understand it from a political standpoint, from an intellectual standpoint. I need to understand its history. I need to know where it comes from. And so that just didn't feel right to me.
Okay.
And then in the 80s, there was the beginnings of a Black or African descended religion sort of spiritual awakening. I don't know if you remember that, but it was.
Yes.
And Louisa Tish published Jambalaya, and which sort of blew doors wide open for those who weren't geographically in places to know someone who knows someone who knew something about something, which was me. Because if you were in New York, you heard, you can see it in Tazaki Shanga's writing, right? You can see you can see the Santeros go tripping through. You can see the little bits and pieces of the Great Migration and the spirituality that was inherent in the Great Migration that came from the South North, and you can taste and get an essence of that, like in Shanga's work. You can get a taste of it in Naylor's work. You can get a taste of it. There's so much. There was this whole like a popping open of the door that if you were a New Yorker, or if you were, or if you had stayed South and were intellectually and academically reconnecting with like Zora Neale Hurston, Alice Walker opened the door on Zora Neale Hurston. You could get a glimpse that there had been a great something. Right? But for those of us who were in, for example, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we didn't we didn't get a taste of any of that because it was pretty homogenous, and or divided by class or divided by geography.
Okay.
And so, and you also had the sort of the assimilation, that sort of talented 10th mentality creeping in and distancing oneself from the folk ways and the stereotypes. And so there was a lot at play politically to get us to the 80s, to where this barn door goes wide open.
Right.
And then as fast as it was blown open, it slammed shut again.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know. And, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. Because if you ask most people, the late 80s and the 90s was a fabulous time for Black women creatives.
Right. Yeah.
It was an amazing time for Black women creatives. And so much cultural work happened in that period of time. And I think some of it has to do with movement capture, especially if I look at the white women, or the white women lesbian community, the women's community, which had and the womanist community, the Black womanist community. We had our own bookstores, we had our own coffee shops, we had our own record labels. Women had our own. We had music festivals and literary events and cultural happenings. Right, we had our own, and we were confined to our own little economic system, and the spirituality was burgeoning. So at any given time, you'd see somebody like Starhawk or Merlin Stone and Louisa Tish all on the same stage together, talking about down with the patriarchy, except for Louise Tish, who was, more of a womanist, because you can't be in an African descended religion and deny the men, right? So, um, so, and then you started to see some crossovers happen. We began to see where there was I would say, corporate movement capture.
Mm-hmm.
Holly Near got a record label deal from a big label, it wasn't going through. Um, the powers that be realized they were losing money as women began to confine their resources,
Mm-hmm.
especially since we were able to confine our resources because we'd been recently given access to, I don't know, our own checking accounts and our own credit
Right.
cards and our own lease signing,
I
right?
was telling someone about that, about how my mom couldn't get a checking account or, heaven forbid, a loan without my father. So
Right.
as soon as she could, as soon as that door opened, she was like, I'm getting my own money. I'm
Mhm.
doing my own thing. Because
That's
my
right.
mother was that had that feminist mentality, too. So she was like, nope, I'm getting my own money. I'm going back to work. I'm opening a checking account. She did all the things.
Right. Right. And it was political. It was a political
Right. It
action.
was.
And it hurt. It hurt the patriarchy because women had choices now.
Right. Right. Heaven forbid you have a choice.
People are like, they're not built like the women of yesterday who stayed through and made it work. It's like they didn't have a choice.
They didn't
They
have a
couldn't get a
choice.
bank account. They
Right.
couldn't sign a lease. They didn't have a choice. They had to make it work.
They had to make it work. Exactly.
And so, so, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me ask you this, because the story is amazing, but I want to ask you this real quick. What is your definition of spirituality
Um,
versus religion?
mhm. I feel religion is an organized structure that has been uh, assigned a hierarchy in many instances of those who have access and those who do not.
Okay.
Spirituality is something we all have and have a right to,
Mm,
which is our own independent connection
okay.
to all of the available energies and entities within the known and unknown universe.
Okay. Okay. I like that definition. Okay. Carry on. Carry on.
So for example, I say within my faith practice as
Mhm.
opposed to within my religion,
Your faith practice. Okay.
right? Um, so, so back to that. So anyway, I think there was some movement capture,
Okay.
and the doors flung shut because when you have now major corporations involved with who's getting published, who's putting out records, who's making movies,
Hmm.
who's you can close down the voices that get heard,
Yeah.
right? And so without the culture makers out there
Hmm.
saying, look, there's something new, and the academics backing them up,
Right.
saying, oh, yes, and here it is,
Right. Right.
and we can prove it, uh, then it goes away. It fades out of the consciousness.
Hmm.
Or it fades not out of the consciousness, it fades to the background. And those for whom it is an undeniable truth, and for those to whom it is a commitment or a pledge, it remains present for them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It
So
does.
our spiritualities never went away. It's just how visible or invisible they become in and out of history,
Okay. Mm.
right?
Yeah. So let me ask you. So you said you kind of, after your brief stint with Catholicism, you kind of just faded out of the religious sector altogether.
Mhm.
So when
Well,
did,
it was political too,
okay.
because then I began to do. Now I grew up my father was a brilliant amateur historian, and I grew up hearing all this stuff. But until I really got separated from it at Antioch College and was able to really tuck into my history as a
Hmm.
Black person in as an Afro-Atlantic,
Hmm.
right? Um, was I be able to understand the depravity of the institution of the Catholic Church.
Let me
And
say this real quick. Don't y'all come for me on this. She's, anybody listening, don't come for me on this. This is amazing conversation. We got to listen with open minds and open hearts. Carry on.
and nothing I am saying cannot be um, backed up with known historical documents,
True.
with uh, and an understanding of what is humane and inhumane.
I agree.
So for me to be in alignment with my politics
Hmm. Hmm.
meant that I was not in alignment with the brutality and the violence of Christianity as a whole.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, and so what am I not saying? And what am I not saying, especially in relationship to Black Jesus? Because Black Jesus is powerful. Black Jesus is a revolutionary.
Mm.
Black Jesus wants to overthrow the corrupt powers that be.
What do you mean?
Black Jesus,
What do you mean by Black Jesus? When you say that.
when I say Black Jesus, I
I heard you
mean,
say it before, so I want to know what your definition
well,
is.
my definition is that 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 black that okay. My definition is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed,
Mm.
and so therefore, when we put our energies towards something, it goes to a place. Some people would call it an egregore, but I just like to believe in it as its own self. And um, so I would say that the power and the faith of a very spiritually advanced people like Africans,
Hmm.
when they interacted with this entity named Jesus,
Hmm.
this Jesus became this Jesus in the Bible who turned over tables in the temple, right? This Jesus in the Bible who sat down with who healed the sick, who laid on hands,
Hmm.
right? That Black Jesus was familiar. That Jesus was familiar to African peoples,
Yeah.
right? Because they already had an ancestral or intuitive knowing of that kind of person
Yeah.
that Jesus was.
Right.
You hear what I'm saying? So that Black Jesus walked beside Nat Turner, right?
Mm.
That Black Jesus uh, um, walked beside Nanny of the Maroons. That Black Jesus was active. And so that 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 energy that whites tried to get us to direct into their destruction, mayhem, and violence didn't go there. It went towards our understanding of who that entity truly was, went to the essence of the truth of that entity.
Mm.
So, lest people be upset with me, let me be absolutely clear that
Mm.
I have no problems with Black Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I choose not to be aligned with the institutions that promote a Jesus, any Jesus. We don't know which one.
Right. I agree. I agree.
So,
And that's why I wanted to have you on here because you and I, even though I don't, when we had talked before, um, I don't know a lot about the different spiritualities like the Orish. I've read a little bit, but mine is just for me having that, like you said in the beginning, that spiritual connection with things seen and unseen, and
mm,
not necessarily in um, a religion. It's that spirituality that, no, I don't know why I feel this way. I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't know, all those I don't knows, but I also know that there is a guiding force around me, in me.
mhm.
So that's why I wanted to really have this conversation with you because you seem like you have so much wisdom and knowledge in this area.
Well,
And I'm
I
like,
don't really. I don't. What I do have is some time asking these questions and trying to answer them for myself.
okay.
Because I would never be out here trying to say I have wisdom or knowledge because I'm aware there's so much
Yes.
out there, so much left to learn,
Right.
so much left to discover, so much left to put back to reassemble
Mhm.
of ourselves, of what we were stripped of
Right.
at the origins of the diaspora. There's so much to recollect. I like what you said about relationship to the seen and unseen
Hmm.
world. And for me, that is the another essence of spirituality. It's about paying attention to those relationships. And you've said you've always felt it around you.
Hmm.
Of
Hmm.
course you have. Africans um, and African descended people have always carried with us. It's core to our beliefs of acknowledging, remembering, and speaking of those who went before us, those who paved their way. It's built into our culture.
Yeah.
And so, even if it's not formalized in ways and systems that different faith practices have codified them, we still do it.
Right.
In the traditional meal we make on New Year's Eve, or in certain things we serve, or certain ways we deal with the dead.
Right.
There are just things that have remained alive that are just built into the way we do things. We are never without our ancestors.
True. How do you, this is a question I ask myself, and I listen to a lot of different women that, you know, delve into the spirituality. How do you gain that or develop that closeness with your ancestors? What would
Mm.
be, how did you develop that as an example?
What I've always known them to be with me. Like I said, when I was 8, when I was doing the right thing, I would feel my grandfather's hand on my shoulder, right? Um, and I didn't have language for that until like the early 80s when I discovered Black women's spirituality. And I was like, oh, this is a thing we do. Um, and and I gotta say, my early spiritual years were full of nonsense and mayhem. And I'm the And I'm the first one, and I'm the first one to acknowledge that
Hmm.
and understand that the Orisha, the Loa, all the other forces in the world that come in this there's a great big world of there are so many different African descended faith practices here
Right.
on this side of the Atlantic. So many. So ones that are just now beginning to be talked about.
Okay.
And and so many that weren't available to know about until recently. And so but coming back to that knowing is so there was a lot of, and I see this among the young people. Let me also qualify it that way. I see this among the young people. There's a very capitalist orientation to um, to a lot of these faith traditions,
Right. Oh yeah.
and and so um, and so that's little bit of what I talk about with the foolishness and mayhem. I was given a deep and profound lesson in this when I was very young and beginning to investigate all of this spiritual world,
Mm.
this new spiritual world for me. And I guess I'll share it because I think it's a valuable lesson, especially if there's anybody young listening or anybody who's coming into this conversation with this kind of attitude
Hmm.
or understanding of what it means to be in this. Um, so there I was, probably 22 years old, full of my hormones and very full of myself. And I had decided that my life was not really to my liking, and I needed vast more amounts of money. So I decide to do many and multiple prosperity workings. And I'm doing them all, and I'm burning all the candles.
Mm.
I got one going. I got one going strong, right? And I get up to nurse. I'm nursing my daughter. And my little altar was in my room. Big mistake, number one. And I'm thirsty because I'm nursing. So I get up, I go out to the kitchen to get some lemonade. I take her with me. I don't know why, but something says, "Oh, bring baby girl with you so she don't wake up." Take baby girl with me. And in the minute it took me to go out to the kitchen, the altar spontaneously combusted and burned down my apartment.
Oh my.
And someone said, why did you have all those, why did you have that candle going? What were you doing? Why did you leave it unattended? Right.
Right. Right.
And I was like, and I told a friend of mine we were all investigating spirituality. We're all young people investigating spirituality. And I said, I was doing a prosperity working. And there was some, I don't remember who it was, but there was an older Black voice somewhere I get behind me that said, "You really rich now. You have your life." And I thought about that. I was so chagrined. I
Mm.
was so embarrassed
Yeah.
because that Black voice, I didn't even turn around. I was so embarrassed. I just didn't even want to see who said that to me. So I don't know if it was a real person or an energy
Right.
or my spirit guide or who it was, because I didn't know much about that back then. But I have thought about that for years. And I realized that, and it was in that moment that I realized that you, it is so much more important to turn with gratitude to the things you do have than it is to constantly be focused on putting energy toward what you lack. Because the more energy you put to what you lack, the more energy that builds around you,
Exactly. Yes.
right? And so you're feeding the I don't have
Right.
rather than feeding the I have.
I have. Right.
So that was my first little spiritual lesson. So a lot of folks come into this, they want love, they want money, they want health, right? They
Right.
want something. And that's, that's the human condition, because what do you go to church for? You go to church, you pray, right, for what you want.
Want. Mm-hmm.
And but it was in that moment it shifted my entire approach
Okay.
towards this. And then later, I came to understand, as I began to move forward in my life and experience some amounts of success and really come into the person I was,
Mm.
um, then I began to realize that um, your relation, that you have to spend time. You have to sit down and talk to them. Tell them about your day. It's like, how you have a couple of friends you call once a week, or you call every day, check in, or you call, everyone has that little friend they call. And your ancestors, your spirit guides are like that too. And so a lot of people think they go to these energies always with a handout. I need money. I need love. I need this. And they become a $5 friend. You know, you know the $5 friend, right?
Well, what if someone says, well, if they're around me all the time, don't they see how my day is going? Don't they see the hardships?
How would you like it? Now, and I'm like, and now here's assuming that you have like a little space for your ancestors, or a little place where you have family photos or whatever.
Right.
How would you like it if you were sitting in your house and one of your housemates woke up every day and just walked right on by you and didn't say a word?
Okay.
How would you like it if you go out and and everybody's there, you walk into the party and you don't say a word to not one of those people you know, and go talk to a stranger?
Okay. Right.
You feel some kind of way, wouldn't you?
Yes. Definitely.
Like
Definitely.
your husband came down in the morning and
Right.
just walked right by you to make coffee.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
There'd be talking that night, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
What makes you think that would be so is so different?
Okay. Okay.
Why would it be so different? Something good happens in your life, some unexpected. You find a parking space. You can't say, "Oh, good looking out, thank you."
Right.
Somebody give you a $5 bill you find on the street
Thank
right when you needed five. Somebody puts $20 in a pocket in a coat right when you needed $20, and you're not going to say thank you. I mean, just think about it.
Right. Because you're right, because if you can't say thank you for the little things, what makes you think you deserve the bigger things?
They're there, they see you,
Right.
but you just gonna walk on by.
Okay, good point. Good point. All right. So let me ask you, how can you describe a moment when you felt deeply connected to something greater than yourself? And how did it change the way you live or make decisions?
Oh, I would have to say there have been so many moments. And I always go back to that moment, like when I felt my grandfather's hand on my shoulder.
Hmm.
Like I've felt that when I did. I've always, when I first started sitting and meditating, um, I would. It was a sensation would happen. You know, um, where I feel it. I feel it. It's so hard to describe.
Right.
It's
Because
like a,
everybody, it's going to be different for everybody.
and it's exactly, it's going to be different for everybody. And I would say the first time I really felt it consciously to was when I began to like really sit with my ancestors and pay attention
Okay.
and just sit with openness. And um, yeah, sorry, that makes me. I want to come back to what you said about if they're all around us all the time, why don't they do anything? Is like one, what makes you feel like you're the only pebble on the beach, right? Number one. Number two, they got their own spirit lives.
Okay.
And number three, um,
So, in other words, they're not here to serve us.
they're
They
not our.
are here to be, they are here, I guess if I'm understanding you right, they're not here to serve us. They are here to maybe be a companion, a a friend, guidance. Some of us look say intuition. Is that
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, yeah. They're not here. We are not like, they're not like, it's not like, imagine how crowded, I mean, the street would be. Everybody's walking with their whole lineage with them all the time.
Right.
um it's Yeah, let's leave it at that. They're not our servants.
Okay.
um they're not um they're not they don't it's not like being surveilled. It's not like we live our physical lives in a spiritual surveillance state.
Okay.
I,
Okay. Okay.
I mean, it, I mean, I know a lot of people fear death. Um, and if we think we're going to a place where we end up being somebody's servant 24/7, there's a lot of reasons to fear death in that capacity.
Okay.
We move on. Their souls have moved on. They are elevating. They are doing things in the spiritual realm that we are not privy to, that are for their own evolution.
Oh, okay.
You know, um, that are for their own upliftment. They got their own spiritual lives.
Okay.
They're done with this one,
Right.
right?
So other than our ancestors,
Hmm.
what in your um, learnings? So I know we have the spiritual ancestors, but what other types of, because everybody might not believe in the spiritual ancestors, what other types of spiritual entities are around us? Or maybe they're not around us, but maybe, I mean, they're here, we
They're
just don't
out
see
there for
them.
somebody.
They're
Yeah.
out there for somebody. So, I mean, what other entities or spiritual?
Well, what I know about I know about the Orisha,
Okay.
which are part of the Lukumi tradition, or The Orisha are of Yoruba descent
Okay.
in the New World. So there's different there are different groups of people who do spiritual things in certain spiritual ways,
Mm-hmm.
have different names for the practices that all serve Orisha. So there's Lukumi,
Mm-hmm.
there is Candomblé, which is Brazilian.
Mm.
There is Isheshe, which is the more traditional Nigerian. Um, that is that the motherland aspect of this of Orisha worship.
Okay.
Um, some Orisha show up in the Trinidadian 21 divisions. Um, yeah,
Okay. Okay. And I'm
and
sure
and Ifa.
Tifa. Okay.
So and then what is different are the different ways in which we talk to those entities
Okay.
and the different spiritual sciences we employ to be in relationship with them.
Okay. And again, this is something that it's not something we're going to naturally know. It's something that we have to that we should study in order.
Well, the only people who can work with Orisha
Mm-hmm.
are initiated priests.
Oh, okay.
So to worship the Orisha, one can certainly pay homage to the Orisha. One um, uh, can learn about the Orisha,
Mm-hmm.
but to be in meaningful two-way street working relationship with the Orisha, you have to be initiated
Oh, okay.
as a priest. And initiation isn't like you get initiated and all of a sudden you know all the things about all Orisha. To be initiated is be it's almost like being given a license to learn.
Okay.
It's like if you applied to Harvard and you get into as a freshman, you are not going to go walking on a knocking on a door in Wall Street talking about how you're a
Right.
Harvard,
Right.
right?
Right.
You've been given the license
Mm-hmm.
to earn the information
Right. Okay.
to then say that you have been validated by this institution called Harvard.
Right. Okay.
So that doesn't mean, though, you can talk to the Orisha through priests who do readings, who do Dilagun readings,
Okay.
can receive guidance from the Orisha in that way. Um, but that's that with Orisha worship. If you want to be in this, you receiving a reading to see if you're even called to be
Oh,
in this
okay.
is the first step.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, when people talk about their intuition,
Mhm.
is that something that if someone were coming to you and asking, asking for some spiritual guidance, is intuition something that needs to continue to develop?
It never hurts to develop your intuition.
How would you
And so I think there are a lot of ways to develop your intuition. Um, it, a lot of folks who are Olorisha, which is what a priest is called, an Orisha priest is called. Um, many Olorisha do what are called misas, which are spiritual gatherings, which is really sort of the Latinx adaptation of Allan Kardec's spiritualism that was very popular in the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
And um, and they have spiritual meetings where they become open to receiving input from their spirit guides.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. but so that's a formal way of doing it, and my spiritual house does that. We do misas, and we are very open. We have a lot of um, we have we have a lot of spiritualists who often share bodies with spirit guides
Oh,
and speak. Um,
okay.
and uh, yeah, so that is is like if you ever say someone says like come to misa, that's a wonderful way to develop and guide and nurture your mediumship ability, right?
Oh, okay.
But you don't need it because I know there are a lot of us all by ourselves out here
Yeah.
um, who uh, have been like I was on my own for years, um, and had a early in my spiritual life in my along my spiritual pathway. I had a wonderful teacher who was more conjure based. So that's another pathway for
Okay.
um, people of African descent is especially if you have a Southern heritage,
Mm-hmm.
hoodoo
Mm-hmm.
or conjure. Um, and so I did most of my spiritual training with Peter around mediumship and spiritualism um, and that stuff. And a lot of it is the time we spend sitting um, and offering light to
Now,
our spirit,
when you say sitting, you mean sitting in quietness, sitting in what do you?
sitting in
I'm
quiet,
sitting right now as I'm scrolling, but you're
sitting
saying,
in quietness. And you know the really the most basic way, uh, and this goes across many faith practices, is if you have a glass of water and a candle, it's enough.
mm,
A lot of people go out there and they build elaborate structures and they all these things and a, a glass of water and a candle is enough to do anything.
wow. Okay.
And to sit and give them that light
Mm-hmm.
and that coolness of that water, that life-giving water. Water is, when they say water is life, they mean it. I mean, it's that phrase is so much deeper than we know.
Okay.
Um, and to sit with them. Um, and then later they'll start to, you might just be sitting there one day and they might say, sure miss having fresh flowers around. So you like, oh, maybe I'm gonna put some fresh flowers over here, see what happens.
Okay.
And so it's about you can sit and tell them about your day
Right.
and then sit quietly and listen
Mm,
and attend to the thoughts that are not your own that pop up.
mm. And again, all this takes practice, right? It's not something that, because I know we have so much going on in our minds as it is that it
And that's why I say it's a faith practice.
mhm,
And that's why we call it spiritual work.
spiritual work. Okay.
Work. Because it's work. You want to put out a
It
fresh
is.
glass of water every day? That's another 5 minutes out of your day to do something. In
Okay.
addition to your dishes and sweep your floor and make your bed and wash your clothes, feed your family.
Okay.
That is additional work, right?
Okay.
But even something so simple as setting out a fresh glass of water every day
Okay. And you set that on the altar or wherever?
or a shelf,
Or
just
shelf?
a
Okay.
space that is just there so that nothing else goes there
Oh, okay.
until it's time for something else to go there.
Okay. Okay. So how do you nurture your spirit when you're feeling lost or disconnected?
Wow. I don't think I've ever felt lost or disconnected from spirit.
Wow. Now that's something to be said.
I fall out of discipline sometimes
Okay.
where I don't put out that glass of water, or I don't say good morning, or I don't. Um, but I'm not. Since I started walking this pathway,
Hmm.
have I've always, but and as I sat, like so much, I feel as an artist, we always got to come back to the fact that I'm an artist.
Right.
So much of my work is, I sometimes feel like it's downloads, so
Wow.
much of my stuff, so much, I would say 50% of my artwork
Hmm.
is spirit guided.
Okay.
Because when you're creating, you are in that open, receptive state. Or when you sit down, you face that blank page and you just sit there and you're like, oh, it's this blank page,
Right.
right? Or there's this big empty canvas. you're like, and you're grasping, right? What goes here?
Right.
Um, but I think, uh, so it doesn't have, you don't have to have like an arts practice, but I feel like because I nurtured it in that way. But there are times when you know something that something you didn't know.
Right.
Those I think are times when our spirit guides are helping us.
Okay.
So for example, I have a wonderful administrator spirit guide.
Okay.
And it took me a long time to realize that it was my spirit guide that was helping me along. And it wasn't until people asked me, well, how do you do all these grants and this and planning and stuff? And I was like, oh, or can you help me? Can you help me with it? Was the first time I recognized that it was my guide in action
Hmm.
was someone asked me to help them with a grant. And out of my mouth came like all the text for that grant. And they're like, hold on, wait, hold on. What did you say? And I'm like, and I looked at them and I said, I don't know. And that was a trance. And I
Mm.
said, what was that? I said, oh, that was a trance. I said, okay, we got to go back and piece this together. And we worked it out. And so then I was like, oh, I got to get to know you because you've been so helpful. You've been so helpful facing that blank piece of paper with that open-ended question. You don't know what they want to hear. And I would just go into the zone, right? So knowing when you're getting answers
Oh,
that you're not sure where it's coming from, that's somebody you want to get to know if they're good answers.
what if you, because I know for me, even with doing my YouTube channel, and you want to think, oh, it's just, your brilliant brain thinking of these great ideas. And I've come to realize for me that in the 3, 4 in the morning is when I
Oh,
wake up and have some of the best ideas. And I have to jump out of bed and write it down because I know the next morning, when I get up in the morning, I won't remember.
3 a.m. is like the spirit talking time.
Okay, well, I need them to stop because they wake me. Well, I don't. Can we compromise on the time? That's when I.
I have the same thing.
Okay.
And as a result, have arranged my life around it. Like, I don't do mornings. People are like, oh, you don't do mornings. I'm like, well,
Yeah, well, you do mornings at 3 a.m. That is morning.
you know what? You like all this stuff I'm doing over here? Well, it gets done at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. Yeah, that's when and I'll just wake up and I'm like, oh, and I have to get
But,
up.
it took me until I was over 50 to start claiming that, right? Because once you're over 50, you can start claiming stuff. Like, oh, I don't meet between 7 and 10.
Right?
I don't do
Beauty
that.
of 50 and over. Exactly. Oh my gosh. So, do you believe we all have a purpose? And if so, how does spirituality help us discover or fulfill it?
Well, I do. And in one of the truths that I accept as related to my belief systems is in the Lukumi faith, we have the Ori, which is our first Orisha, basically.
Okay.
And that is that which guides us, which is our head, our super consciousness or whatever. And we pick that before we get here, right? And we
You
go
mean
and we
we pick that when you say before we get here, before we come to Earth,
into this
before we're
body.
born in this body. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it has a purpose and it has a destiny.
Mm,
And the times when we are most discombobulated are the times when we are out of alignment with our destiny, with our Ori, right?
yes. Yes. I felt that a lot.
Mm-hmm. See, yeah.
Hmm.
So when we are moving in alignment with our destiny,
Hmm.
things tend to be easier. Or you get those little 3 a.m. wake up calls of, hey girl, and by the way, let's stay on this good path, and here's all these things that will help you.
Yeah.
Or you get a serendipitous meeting with somebody that you didn't think that uh, was going to advance your career in this direction. Or we all have little, whether we recognize them or not, right?
Hmm.
And to be to live in a spiritual way means to be attentive, not obsessive,
Right.
but to attend to the million and one little miracles that happen every day in our lives.
Mm.
That the the going to the DMV and for some reason nobody's there and you can get through. It is a tiny miracle, right? It's small things, like the littlest things, and being able to recognize and make use of them, and from a place of gratitude.
Okay.
Um, and I think a lot of people, when they imagine, and let me qualify this. There are many and plenty priests who do great big workings and do great big things to help us realign ourselves or cause things to happen.
Hmm.
Um, I am not one of those
Okay.
because I feel that it is my responsibility to attend to living in awareness.
Okay.
Mhm. And to acknowledge all the tiny moments that come together that make my life beautiful.
And focus on those. I was going
And
to ask when we focus on, instead of focusing on exactly what you're talking about, the little tiny miracles that happen throughout our day, and we focus on even the little tiny um, negative things that might happen through the day, does that impact our relationship with our spirits?
I, I, I don't think it's wrong it is important to investigate the negative things.
Okay.
Um,
But it doesn't put up like a block, or if
no,
we're
I
so
don't think
busy focusing on, oh, this didn't happen, instead of focusing, like you said, on the little tiny things. Oh, look at there, the parking place right in front. You don't think that has because Different
I
spiritual.
think depending on how much it consumes you,
Okay.
because there are people who get consumed by lack.
By
There
lack.
are people who get consumed by ambition.
Right.
There are people who become so who view success as dominance
Right.
rather than service, right?
Okay.
And so um, I think it's so important for us to, for me, and I have to say this now, I'm speaking for me and myself alone.
Mhm.
Over the years, I have had to truly define what success looks like for me,
Yeah.
right? Um, Success for me does not look like having 1 million followers,
Right.
right? Success does not look like online beefing.
No.
Success does not look like riding the next trend,
Right.
you know? And so, and for some people, that's what success is. And they can have it. And I'm not going to comment on whether they're spiritually blocked or not,
Okay.
because that might be their destiny.
Mm.
That might be what they're here to do. I don't know. I'm not their spirit guide. I'm not their Orisha. I'm not their Loa. I'm not, I'm, how would I know what their destiny is?
Right.
But for me, this is how it works. And we do have to attend to the negative things that happen because sometimes we need to address them. I'm not sitting where I'm sitting around dancing with the daisies all day long. It's not that at all.
Right. Right. Okay.
And, sometimes the happier you are, the more haters you get.
Right.
And sometimes you have to address that too.
Okay. So how do you incorporate stillness, prayer, or meditation in your life, and what impact has it had on you?
Mm, it's changed a lot over the years.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I used to sit at my special place um, every day, and I used to sit in quiet, sit in silence,
Mm-hmm.
um, with a candle, and be open to thoughts, um, talk about my day, or and and I was still young, so I was still a little bit hard headed. Talk about things I didn't have. And as I grew older, I would sit more often. Sit. I began to sit a little bit less often, rather,
Oh, sit. Okay.
because I had kids, and it's hard to.
Right.
Yeah, that's a luxury for those who have no children. and and then before I worked, I would sit. So before I would start working, I would sit and just take 5-10 minutes to be open and in communion. And I wasn't necessarily at my special place,
Okay.
um, but I always maintained those special places. I always kept a glass of water. Always put fresh flowers. I would often some, and just as a side note, your ancestors and spirit guides will ask for things.
I was going to
They
ask you about that. I was going to ask you, do your ancestors kind of, will they tell you what they want?
mm,
Okay. Because I have
mm,
a mini altar. I didn't really think of it as an altar, but I guess it really is an altar. And, everything that you're saying about the water, about the flowers, about having conversations, I have to get better at that. And
mm,
the water I knew, but didn't know it needed to be something every day. So I'm making notes. But the conversation piece makes a lot of sense because when I think about my ancestors, it would be, of course, my mother who's passed on and my aunt,
mm,
And her and I, my mother and I used to have conversations all the time. And then
Mm,
it stopped once she passed.
mm.
So what you're saying makes so much sense that it doesn't need to stop.
No, it doesn't stop. A year after a year after they go, you give them time to journey on because you don't
Okay.
want to hold them here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because they'll get real busy, but they'll stay. That's not
Oh, okay.
that's not for them. You want them to elevate. You want them to go on to become greater. You want them to grow spiritually. You want them to to be in the light, in their light.
Okay.
Uh, and so yes, but yes, after that year, um, the known and unknown ancestors. Hmm,
Okay. Right.
uh, will let you know.
Okay.
Um, and so there are different things I'll put out depending on what the requirements are. They do like a little bit of they do like some spirits.
Oh, okay.
They do.
Okay. Little sip for me, little sip for them. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
um, and it really depends. Rum is universal. You can always use rum. Rum is just,
Okay. That's what I've heard. Okay.
but I, you can we do get up to some things around here. There are times when we're serving gin and tonics, and times that we're making Manhattans, and we
Oh,
we
okay. Like the
and
fancy
I
drink.
don't drink, right? I'm a
Yeah.
child of Obadala. I don't drink any liquor.
Oh, okay.
But we have a full bar in our house because other people in this house need their liquors. Uh,
No, I'm sorry. I had stopped you from your answer. So what has been the biggest insight during your quiet? Anything that comes to mind?
oh, n- just that I am loved. Then for me, that's huge because uh, we live in a society of such unlove. Like I was talking about with my project of we it is revolutionary for Black women to know that they are loved,
Right.
like that you can be loved, and that you are loved.
Right. If you're
And
so
to walk from that and to walk in those shoes, I am beloved,
yeah.
it brings you a whole different way of being in the world. And it doesn't matter whether anybody feels that way or not. It's irrelevant because what matters is that I'm loved by them.
Okay. So if your soul could speak, what do you think it would be trying to tell you right now?
Mm. My soul says that I have had uh, a fair and decent amount of rest, and that it's time to tell some stories.
Okay. And when will you be telling these stories? Will it be a book through your art? Yes,
Yes, through
I
my
want to listen. I want to hear these stories.
art. So, I'm just gonna. I haven't been writing as much in the past couple of years. I write, but not. And I've been writing. I have been very loudly writing for myself. And my soul is saying that's really cute and everything. Um, but we need to start putting that work out there.
So you're
So,
so how often are you listening? How often do you pause and truly listen to your soul?
um, I think that is something that we sign up for when we walk a spiritual path, is to be constantly touching base with what our Ori is telling us and being in that alignment. And so the reason I had that answer is because I've been answering that, you
Mm,
know, and especially in the wake of my mother's passing,
yeah.
um, that um, so much of the time of the past few years has been dedicated to caring for her.
Okay.
And so now there's an opening.
Okay.
So, um, a few weeks ago, my Ori was saying, stay the course, be attentive, and make the most of these moments,
Mm,
right?
okay. It was preparing you.
Your soul has something new to say every day because we're never the same person that we are when we went to bed that night, the night
Mm.
before.
So that's probably why, or not probably, but that is why meditation's so important.
So important.
Okay.
Hmm. Even, and I'm not talking, we don't have to make a grand production
Right.
out of everything. And, I see online, I see on the TikTok and all the other little spaces, um, so much performance of spirituality,
Right.
right?
A lot of bravado. Yes.
And or aesthetic, 50 11 candles and all the things and tchotchkes
Right.
and and or like, how do I talk to my ancestors? And it was like, well, how did you talk to the ones you knew?
Right.
Right? It doesn't, we don't have to come to our spirit guides and ancestors as oh thou great one upon high,
Right.
oh, we don't have to speak in Latin. We
Right.
don't have to.
We don't even always have to have the best words. Sometimes, just saying, I don't know, hi.
Yes, sometimes it as simple as walking past your place. Some people call it an altar. I just call it my special place. I have many special places around my house, and acknowledging the energy that is there. Hey, good morning. That's it. Good morning.
But do you
It's
think,
enough.
but can you, like for me, sometimes my best time to really focus and meditate is even no headphones on, no noise, no distractions, and just taking a walk near the water sometimes.
Absolutely, and absolutely. There's so yeah, and it's interesting because my child's uh, business, Black Dream Escape,
Hmm.
uh, has been talking a lot about different ways of resting.
Mm,
Sometimes resting can be fiddling around with a craft. Sometimes resting can be um, tweaking around on your guitar. Sometimes resting can be a walk.
mm,
Um, my child does these little videos called "Look for the Friends Around You," where they go and introduce you to a plant. Like, this is my friend. Its
mm.
name is Holly. You know,
Right, right.
um, being in active relationship with the world around you
Hmm.
is a spiritual activity.
Okay.
I used to have this one tree when I lived in Ohio. I still miss her. I called her the mama tree. And I used to go and I told this tree so many things. She was my friend. She's an entity,
Right.
you know. She's everything around, every living thing around us vibrates at a certain level.
Certain energy.
And we can be in relationship with our entire world
Right.
You know, like my yard is my oracle. I can tell what I need by the weeds that spring up,
Wow.
you know,
Right.
like that's so eventually when you really walk this path, it changes you and it humbles you, or it humbled me a tremendous amount. Because I had to realize I'm not the only star. You know, the willow tree down the street from me is a superstar. She's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
The daffodils that come up every year are incredible. You know, the burdock that volunteered right when I needed some burdock root was a blessing. You know, these things are not happenstance.
Right.
So yes, and uh within many most African descended faiths, we pray through song, we pray through dance, we move our bodies. It is not always sitting quiet.
Right.
It's never always been sitting quiet. I happen to like sitting quietly. But if you want to put on some African drums and go to it in your living room,
Right.
that is a form of prayer. That is a form of meditation. And back when I used to dance, dancing was a time when things could come through
Mm.
because
Mm.
uh, because in order to keep going, you have to let go.
Okay.
You know, like if a runners know that last 50 feet, sometimes you have to let go in order to allow whatever's going to move your body
Right.
across the finish line
Right.
to
Right.
get across it, to do that.
Right.
When you can do no more, something will carry you the rest of the way.
Mm. I like that. I like that. Well, Miss Christina, again, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming back on.
I'm so glad to be here.
And I don't care what you said, what you say, you're spreading your wisdom and your knowledge because you've opened my eyes and helped me to understand some things a little bit better. And that's what this is all about. That's what my channel is all about. I just want women to come and share their knowledge, help me grow. Hopefully, I'm helping them grow, helping other people grow. So, again, thank you. And this again has been an amazing conversation. So, I thank you very much for taking
Oh,
your time coming on and talking to me.
I'm so grateful. And I'm so grateful for you doing what you do because it is so important
Yeah,
and it is such necessary work.
thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. So you've heard this amazing conversation. I hope you have gotten some amazing information from it, learning some stuff about our spirituality. I will have Christina's information in the description below. She is an artist. Are you selling your work? You still have your website, right?
I have my website, my paintings and those things are not up for sale yet. We'll be making
Okay.
some changes this year.
Okay.
Um, but my shop, yes,
Okay.
those are all my original designs that I
Okay.
make myself. And I've got everything from socks to suitcases,
Oh, okay.
uh, and yeah, and everything in between.
Okay, well, I will
So
make sure that your information's in the description so they can check out all your amazing work. All right,
thank you.
y'all. Thank you again for joining us, and I will see you again next week. Bye.